Всем добрый день. Коллеги подсказывают мне, что мы в
So it is a great pleasure for me to address you. We are online. My name is Sofia Sabel, and I am head of the regional program of Zeleny Institute, and I'm going to be the moderator of this presentation. Last week, on February 26th, we have finalized the second meeting of the jury of the Open International Competition for the Best Architectural and Urban Planning Concepts for the Integrated Development of Saratov City Center. Quite a construction. And so we now have two finalists, two final consortiums, which were picked out of 5. And today, finalists, led by Carson Brandt and Citymakers, are going to present their projects of the planning concepts for the integrated development of Saratov City Center. Finalists have developed the integrated urban development solution for Park Pobedy complex, for Zeleny Island, Glebuchef Ravine, Pokrovskie Peski Island. And the preparatory projects are defining the landscape solutions, transport infrastructural solutions within 5 focus locations within the city center. So today you have an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the concepts and ask your questions. There are several rules to the feedback. As soon as the consortium has finalized the presentation, you can address questions to the finalists. We have the chat within our translation, and please use this chat room to address the questions. And I invite you to note the name or the position of the person to whom you would like to address the question. Or perhaps if you're asking the consortium as a whole, please specify it. And we invite you to ask questions dedicated to conceptions, to their approach, and this would be it. And I'm happy to give floor to Anastasia Kolchina. She is the leader of the first consortium, and the floor is hers. Anastasia, off you go. So it is a pleasure for me to address you. I will now serve through the presentation. Well, first and foremost, we would like to thank Saratov and Dom RF for making such a tremendous contest. We'd like to thank Strelka for the carefully and meticulously developed brief. We, as a rule, usually work within international teams, but in this context, we decided to work differently, and we put together a team of Russian contestants, because it was very important for us to make a project which is manageable and which is implementable. And it is important for us to think about the life cycle of the locations for which we produce. So on our team, we have architects, we have ecologists, we have urban planners, we have economists, and we were working on developing new job offerings, new job markets, new branches of big Russian companies. We were aiming to develop the agricultural sector because there are many foundations for this development, because the territory is beautiful, there is the river complex, and so these economic functions which we looked into are assigned to specific locations, especially in the area of the former airport. And we decided to make a small district which wouldn't look like the typical Soviet or post-Soviet district. We decided to aim for something different. So we had this idea of making the district under the conceptual pinning back to the future. So we decided to think of a beautiful city which was developing on the embankment of Volga River, leaving aside all the explosions of the Soviet development. And we decided to create a green circle of sorts, which enables the citizen to walk by feet and to have no public transport whatsoever. And we have also decided to ditch trade centers, and we decided to go for the first floor shopping activities. And we also proposed having cultural centers and historical centers, and developing green corridors and pedestrian routes so that people can access this territory and enrich their cultural. What's important to note is that the planning is very responsive to what's happening outside the district, because it is our idea to weave it carefully within the urban texture. And you may see that there's this contrast between this territory and the traditional historical center. And this contrast will be a playful one, inviting people to visit the district. This would be it regarding the airport, and the floor is now given to Igor. I will talk about the Pobeda Park. My name is Nikonov Igor, and I represent landscape company Arteza, and we are practitioners by nature, and we like to develop and implement projects from concept to the artistic direction and author licensing. And usually we're not partaking in contests, but this one was very, very important for me, and I pulled people in and I lured our company to work with it because I myself am originally from Saratov. Regarding Park Pobedy, I remember that a couple of times when I was a kid, my dad took us there a couple of times, and I was happy to explore the military cars and tanks which are positioned there. And that's what I remember. And also once we came there when a friend of mine was having a wedding. But now, when we were having a field trip with our consortium, I was looking at this park from the professional point of view, and I came to the conclusion that my childhood experience is not a singular one, and that many people have it within their collective memory. And this park is not quite inhabited because it is removed from the city center, and it's not very easy. It's not easily accessible via car, or I'm not even talking about the public transportation. And there's not ever a great reason to come there. Can we move to the next slide, please? Area of the park. We're also creating 3 transportation hubs. One is to the north, near Mesnitskaya Street, and there is one on the Счастливая Street, and then there is another one closer to the National Village. So the second question, which is, why should I even go to the Park Pobedy complex? Our solution and our answer to it is having the family-inclusive memorial and entertainment park. And so we want to have the Zhuravli Park, to have it as it was presented and conceptualized by the architect. And we want to develop the other areas of the park accordingly to this entertainment agenda. So we suggest restoring the historical site, historical exhibition within the park, and making it a quest park. Regarding the National Village, we like this initiative very much, but as of now, there is one weak point, because it is not plotted interestingly. One can spend there half an hour, but there is no more sense to be there, and that is something we want to develop. We want National Village to brim as the center of, as a cultural destination for many people from the city. So all the things I have described so far, that is about 30 to 40% of the park square. And this park is quite big. It is 100 hectares, and it is a nature park. It is a nature resort. And we'd like to work with this nature framework, and we'd like to make it more sustainable. And we'd like to create better public goods, which are safety, which is shadow, which is proper lighting system. And we'd also like to develop the all seasons sport activities. And we're having the running tracks, and we're having the tobogganing. And I can talk about this for hours, but I have no option to do that. So that is something which is of great importance to the contemporary city. That would be it regarding the Park Pobedy complex. So it is a pleasure to address you. So our bureau has a diverse international experience, but usually we develop public areas within the Russian cities, and we have many people originally from Saratov in our bureau, and it was therefore important for us to work for this project. I was born and bred in Saratov, and I am an alumni of Saratov Architectural Institute, and I decided to work on the development of Glebuchef Ravine. So I lived in the very center of Saratov, and I spent a lot of time nearby the Saratov dungeon, and we are now suggesting to create the ecological park, which may be the outdoor museum of Saratov everyday life. And so this territory, which is underexplored from the point of view of the local history, may now become the informational center which informs people of the culture of Saratov. So in our color scheme is derived from the palettes of the Pavel Kuznetsov, who was a famous painter. And we're also referring, with the shapes which we offer, we refer to the history of the bell-producing plant which existed in Saratov. So let's talk about the landscape within the park. We are highlighting the ecological specialties of the ravine and of Saratov as such. And we have a certain color streak within the project, such we're creating a pond with 2 wooden bridges. And we're also creating a part of Saratov steppe nearby the existing car bridge. We would be very careful with working with the suburban area of Saratov, and we're going to install carved wooden barriers so as to preserve the noise reduction. And because we know this territory almost by heart, because we're working within the limits of creating economically viable location, we are installing a big bridge, which is going to be an architectural dominant point, which connects this territory to the existing Orthodox church complex. And we are also creating curved and very comforting roads which create the outer rim. And here we may see this part of Saratov steppe with beautiful grass, which is special for the Saratov steppe. And I'm giving floor to the next speaker. It is a pleasure to address you. My name is Mikhail, and I come from the Faculty of Biology of Saratov University. My name is Mikhail Vasilievich Lavrentiev, and I was overlooking the ecological principles within this project. And when we were developing the Zeleny Island, it is a highlight of this approach because it is more ecologically developed rather than anthropologically developed. It's connected to my scientific field trips on the embankment of the pond, and sometimes I accidentally went there for fishing. So this territory is noted for the vast diversity of rare species, both from the animal world and both from the floral world. So back in the day, scientists noted, and I myself, being a scientist, also noted that this is a unique ecosystem. This archipelago has a very specific gradient which creates the specific biodiversity. Next slide, please. So the scientific researches which we had on those isles led us to the idea of creating the nature reserve on this archipelago. We decided that it may enhance the ecological knowledge of the Saratov citizens, but it also may be of help to those who study in Saratov University so that they can study the biology and organic chemistry of the region. And we're going to maintain the structure. We're going to preserve the boat station, which is located there. We are going to leave plots of wilderness, and we're going to create green corridors, which would be open to the visitors of the Zeleny Island. So further on, we're going to talk about Pokrovskie Peski Island. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Soborova, and I also come from Megabutka. I was born in Saratov, and I lived there for a long period of my life. And my grandma and my granddad lived in Engels. Therefore, I was constantly traveling across Volga on the bridge. And especially in summer, I saw people having their leisure activities on Pakrovskie Peski. Perhaps if you're living in Saratov, this may be the only place where you can have a bath, but there's a lack of shadow. In order to get to Pokrovskie Peski, you're just walking side by side with cars, and there is no shadow, but still this place is very popular. And we wanted to hone this location, make it sort of a point of pride for every Saratov citizen. And so therefore we decided to suggest having this comfortable, curvy down slope which leads to the Peski Island. It would be a beautiful project which gives also this postcard feeling to the overall infrastructure of the territory. And we also planned to develop the leisure infrastructure, because we know that there are some people who would like to spend some time sunbathing, but also swimming within the pool. So we decided to plan a couple of pools. And we know that this island is quite big, and therefore we can create the bicycle routes on the very island. And we may also be able to create a camping here. And we also think that Pokrovskie Peski may be a great venue for music festivals or raves, because we feel that it may add vibrance to this island. And this may be a place, meeting point, a melting point for youth from all over Russia and not only Saratov. So I guess the floor is being given to me, because all the projects, No. There's something we got to add. We got to talk about the transport. My name is Maria Glavenkin. I will talk about the transport infrastructure, and I come from the studio of transport infrastructure development. And when we were just devising the concept, we had this general question: how can we interweave those 5 locations with the everyday life of the Saratov citizen? And the answer to this question led us to the development of the very complex system, with highlighting prioritized hubs and points within the city, which are of great importance to those who want to reach them by feet. So we decided to think about this walkable scale, human scale, car scale, etc. And the city transport infrastructure will have 4 new stations added with the rope road, and we would also make more points and more stations for the sea transportation, for the water transportation, because it would provide better connection between Pokrovskie Peski and Zeleny Island. What is also important that we have accentuated the entrance to the park areas and we have eased the pressure on the crossroads which are connected to some of the territories. So we have devised several transportation hubs of different scale, and in some of them we were to create seamless experience, changing the transportations. And some of those hubs were planned specifically with touristic groups in mind. And we would also like to talk about the former airport area, specifically because we're redeveloping the transportation infrastructure, weaving it into the existing infrastructure differently. So the crossroads which we're now offering is a network which enables to connect the central part of the city with far distributed areas of the city. So there would be no transit through the areas through which the transit is created now. And this leads to the creation of more walkable territories. And this will help people with easing the pressure on their everyday practices. So crossroads we interpret as the transportation hubs of smaller scale. And we're looking into the ways to provide the seamless shift from pedestrian style of exploring the city to the public transportation or to the bicycle or to whichever. And the network we propose is going to enhance the experience of navigating the airport area. And the infrastructure we offer enables the visitors and those who live there to have more routes added to the existing infrastructure. So, for example, we open up space for logistics, and there may be even freight routes along the way. And we're also given specific routes, and we're designing routes for school buses so that the connection between the school and the house would be a comfortable and a safe one. So all this together, seen as a complex of solutions, gives us a chance to enhance the volume of pedestrian activity, of public transportation activity. And so our solution, specifically adding the importance of the airport territory, may enhance the experience of walking and driving through the city. And I would also add a couple of words. So we have done a thorough research, and it's quite hard to present all the solutions we developed given the 20-minute framework we have. But I would outline the conceptual basis of our solutions. So if we talk about the demographic situation in Saratov, it is in decline, and it is a pity for us. But we, as the architects and the specialists of other disciplines, we know how to change this demographic trend. So we are working with numbers and with tools which would enable living in Saratov, making a comfortable living. So we have created such spaces with such and such functions so that Saratov citizens feel themselves fully integrated within the city, and so they could be happy citizens. And we would also like to create a project which initiates a positive influx of soon-to-be Saratov citizens. So this would be it, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have. So you may address us the questions about the local identity, and we can talk about this for hours. But so the very end note would be voting for the project. So I'm not implying that you should vote just for us. I'm slightly giving you a nod regarding this vote, but please look at the other contestants, look at the other projects, because these projects deserve your attention. So have a happy vote, and I do hope that we work just fine. Thank you. This was Artyom and your team. Thank you for presenting the concept, and I invite each and every one of you to vote. And I have that there are many questions within the chat room. There was a question regarding the budget of the conception, and here I would like to address each and every one of you who's interested in the budget. A colleague of ours will now send a link to the website. There is an indicative cost estimate which was planned and which was given to our contestants. So now it is my pleasure to give floor to Darius Reznik, who is the leader of the second consortium. Darius, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And I would like also to thank the organizers of the competition, the client, as well as the city of Saratov for allowing us to work in such a beautiful location, giving us the opportunity to do that. I might be probably the only person that is not born in Saratov. I am a foreigner, but I have visited Saratov on many occasions, and even got a chance to land on the Centralny airport when it was still in use. So I know the city quite well. I represent Kares & Brands. We are a landscape architecture, urbanism and architecture office based in the Netherlands and Germany. And we have 30 years of experience of working from Melbourne to Oslo, implementing public space plans and urban plans. We currently work on the largest urban plan in Germany and Europe's most sustainable master plan. But we've also worked in the past 10 years a lot in Russia. I think my passport is full of Russian visas, and I've been lucky enough to travel through Russia by plane, train, bus and bike and everything in between, and work in cities such as Svobodny, Ivanova, Sergiev Posad, Moscow, all the way to St. Petersburg. And got a chance also to spend quite a bit of time in Saratov already 5 or 6 years ago. And we wanted specifically to make a team for this project which can work as one office. So I have the honor, thanks to my colleagues, to present on behalf of everybody. But this is very much a collective effort, and we've all worked as equals. And it was very important for us to make a plan that looks to the future of Saratov, that combines international knowledge with strong local knowledge, and makes a plan that makes the both best worlds. And I would like to give now the floor to Patrick to introduce the office Manda Works, and then to Leonid to introduce Cosmos.
Thank you very much, Darius. Very pleased to be in this competition and to be part of it. My name is Patrick Verhoeven. I'm from the office called Manda Works. And I would say maybe Russia is even the missing link between these three offices. All three offices worked a lot in Russia. We ourselves, as an office for landscape architecture, also urbanism and architecture, have worked also for several years now in Russia. Not only Saratov then, but also Tyumen, Kaliningrad, for example, and other parts of Russia. So this is also an inspiration, and the culture of Russia is an inspiration for our three offices in our collaboration. Our office is seated in Stockholm. That's where the main office is. We're about 20-25 people, with also an office now in Montreal in Canada and in China, in Shanghai. So we're very used to working together also with Kares & Brands and Cosmos in international projects, and looking really for the local spirit of the site and making it into an extra special project that really makes something different out of the local specifics that we have in Saratov in this project. I give the word to Leonid from Cosmos to also introduce their office.
Добрый вечер. Большое спасибо за предоставленную возможность. Мы представляем...
It is a pleasure to address you. So I represent Russian Architectural Bureau Cosmos, and we work with a wide array of projects. We work with interior design, art installations, urban planning, landscape architecture. And we are recognized locally and internationally, and we have the main office in Moscow, and we also have the headquarters in New York and Zurich, and we are quite experienced in developing public spaces, and primarily public spaces in Moscow, and big and small cities all over Russia. We have developed the concept for the airport on Kamchatka. We have developed the concept for university in St. Petersburg. We have developed sport complex in Kazan, and we devised several projects for Moscow and Moscow region. Despite the involvement in international context, our bureau is very involved in Saratov's history, and our portfolio holds a project devised for Saratov, and we were very happy to be a part of this project. And as Darius already said, we worked as a team. That means we have discussed all the territories and all the areas we discussed together, and therefore Darius is going to present the project as a whole. So if you have any questions which should be directed to Patrick or me, we would be happy to respond. So I would like to thank, good luck to Darius, who's going to present.
Thanks, Leonid. I hope everybody can see the screen. And I will start with this overview because this is very important to our plan. We started really by looking at the area as a whole and at the unique nature of each of these 5 sites, but at the same time on the fact that they need to be connected. Saratov is a city that has always had a strong relationship to nature, to the river Volga. The fish is on the flag, so the relationship with the river is a very important feature. So we wanted to strengthen this network of ecologies and green networks and bring back all the green structures in the city and open up the sites and connect them in this new ecological and recreational network that celebrates the individual nature of each site, but at the same time connects them together in terms of green structure, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of recreation and functions. They are no longer islands, but they are integral parts of the city. That was very important to us. At the same time, when you look around, you see how rich the identity of each of the sites is, which was very important to us and to our plan. You don't very often see a city that has so many kind of typologies of ecological spaces, of green spaces, of cultural history and industrial history in one place. So we wanted to celebrate that and give all the sites their own identity that is based on what's already there. So the airport infrastructure forms the identity of the new city district here. The kind of a series of gardens and stitches connecting the public garden on top of Pobedy Park forms the identity here. The bridges on the Glebuchef Ravine, or the stitches and dunes on Peski Island, or the debarcadère in Zeleny Island. These form like very clear and iconic kind of points of identity that strengthen the character of each of the space and bind them at the same time together. So then when you look at this plan as a whole in the city, it's not kind of a, just an iconic new district. It's part of Saratov. It's the natural evolution of Saratov growing as one city together, into kind of a new future that celebrates both ecological history and the relationship with the river, but at the same time also the kind of youth, the university, the kind of vibrancy of the city and the diversity in the city. That was very important to us, to create a district that is not, you know, it's not Europe, it's not Copenhagen, it's not the Netherlands, but also it's not just specific Russia. It's Saratov. It's not a district that you can copy anywhere else. It's just in Saratov, and it's a natural evolution of Saratov that we think is very important. And when you look at the airport side, what was for us, that I think the whole plan can be summarized in these 6 diagrams. The most important thing was that we open it up, that the airport becomes part of the city, but that we don't just erase everything and build an iconic new district that's based on the past, but that it's a natural evolution, and it's something that celebrates the airport infrastructure. The runways of the airport, which are so iconic, they become the main public spaces of the neighborhood. They become boulevards or green spaces in the neighborhood. And they allow for the surrounding neighborhoods to naturally kind of grow and evolve from outside in rather than from inside out. And then each of them get their own kind of clear identity that's based on the surroundings. It's not something that we invented. With a green network that celebrates the ecological connections in Saratov, and a green park, a new green central park at the center where all of these neighborhoods come together. That was very important to us. So when you look at the plan, it's not, you almost should not see anymore the boundaries of the airport, but actually it's a very natural evolution of the surroundings. So it's basically Saratov growing back together. This was always a black spot in the city fabric, and now the city is kind of growing together and coming together around this beautiful new central park. All of the neighborhoods are evolving into the center, and they are kind of connected by the airport infrastructure that becomes public space, and this green network of parks and ecological connections where all the schools, kindergartens are positioned, and where you can move freely with the bike, with walking or public transportation. Pedestrian-friendly new district with this beautiful new park at the heart, where all of these identities of Saratov come together, but that also celebrates the identity of the airport, the big scale, spaces for events, for picnics, for gathering and things like that. And where each of these neighborhoods are based on the identities of the surroundings. So having in the west this yards neighborhoods that brings together the typology of these industrial typologies with residential housing, and then having this kind of typologies where you have shopping at the ground floor and housing on top. Or this garden neighborhoods to the northeast that dissolves this individual housing, respects the scale of the surroundings, and grows into kind of a garden neighborhood. And at the center of the development, kind of a reinterpretation of the city center of Saratov, a dense urban neighborhood with diversity in colors, typologies, and sizes, but also very human scale. That was this typological connection was very important in our plan. And at the same time, that through this green network, the existing airport heritage, like old hangars and things like that, they are not erased and thrown away, but they are transformed in new, beautiful public spaces for sports and recreation in the city. So the airport is part of the city now. In Pobedy Park, what was very important was that we basically create this kind of beautiful green garden on top, and celebrate the kind of memorial function in a kind of colorful and family-friendly way. And at the same time, that all the interventions that we do, they are not only kind of for recreation, but they also repair the fragile mountainside. So these pathways going up to the hillside, they are not just pathways, but they are also strengthening and reinforcing and protecting from landslides. So it's this mix between architecture and ecology that works very well here, we think. And of course, at the top, a beautiful new cable car that connects to Zeleny Island and this fantastic new hillside transformed into these public gardens, as you can see. So the public gardens on the hillside as a reinforcing of the hillside, but at the same time activating and giving the space back to the citizens. This beautiful, unique museum in a garden setting, colorful garden setting, where all the kind of exponents are being showcased, the history is being showcased and made accessible, recovering the museum and the stitches that protect the hillside. So when you go up, you experience a fantastic kind of play of gardens, and you can go up to the cable car. And when you're up, you are rewarded with this kind of beautiful museum, beautiful memorial in a very colorful and unique setting, combining kind of playfulness with learning about the history. That was very important in this plan. Talking about Glebuchef Ravine, what we found very important was that we connect the two sides of the ravine together, that whatever we do here brings the city back together. So basically we found in the archives, Cosmos found in the archives these references and these beautiful kind of bridges that were here. And those we used as kind of inspiration for our intervention, these bridges that connect the two parts of the city together and allow for this meandering routes under that go down to the River Volga and introduce spaces for play, museums, active recreation, colorful gardens, and water storage for the city. And these bridges, they're not just bridges, they're at the same time spaces for play, activation, for sports, they include functions, and they kind of invite the city to occupy the ravine and to play in the ravine and to use the ravine, and become this kind of very iconic new series of interventions that connect, but at the same time activate and open up the ravine to the people of Saratov, and allowing for play, sports, and recreation underneath. This very unique kind of landscape where you can imagine, having a coffee in one of these passerelles on top and watching over children playing in the ravine in the winter or in the summer as a very unique experience. For Peski Island, what was very important for us is that we don't just activate the island with program, but that we also protect the island. The island is very fragile. It suffers from erosion because of the movement of the river. So what we did was every intervention that we made was meant to activate, but at the same time protect the island from erosion and strengthening it. So that is not only here for the next 10 years, but for the next 1,000 years and thrives. So you can see in the middle this iconic dune landscape where everything is concentrated, a very playful landscape that combines functions and ecological strengthening. And at the same time, these kind of stitches that concentrate, program, and reach into the water to provide areas for swimming, for boats to dock, sports, and things like that. So you can see these interventions that combine kind of active landscape and nature protection in this iconic dune landscape. And they find places where you can kind of go to the beach or have sports activities or even festivals and things like that, but at the same time protect the island and have every function that is integrated here is kind of almost masked in the identity of the island and is part of the identity of the island rather than sticking out and provides a new playful feature. And lastly, Zeleny Island, we had a lot of discussions here about, how can you design with nature? And the best thing to do in this kind of fragile and beautiful ecological ecosystem is actually to leave it alone. to stay away from it and not to try as architects that we kind of design nature. Nature thrives on its own, it doesn't need us. So what the most important thing that we did here was that we decided to stay away, to leave as much as possible space for nature itself. So we positioned everything on these kind of like debarcadere-like structures that are inspired by the past, by existing structures. These iconic debarcaderes along Zeleny Island. So and in order to, because we did this, we managed to leave the entire center of the island basically free for nature with minimum intervention and allow nature to thrive, so that we don't just overly make this place overly touristic, but at the same time protect its identity that we know and we love so much. So these kind of debarcadere-like structures are very important because they basically allow for the island to thrive, but at the same time activate. We can provide spaces for boat docking, for clubhouses, for canoe storage, or small pontoons for boats that are in the water rather than on the island, and integrated in a kind of activated in a very special way, in a very iconic way, very uniquely Saratov way. And then in the middle, you see this beautiful kind of nature eco trails that can make parts of the island accessible and allow for spots for camping and things like that, but where we mostly allow nature to thrive rather than try to design it. And then these debarcaderes as a kind of iconic structure that, you know, on the one hand, you know, your grandma and grandpa can recognize as being uniquely Saratov or uniquely of this place, but at the same time, the new children of Saratov were kind of embraced as kind of iconic structures to play and enjoy in the future, and things that also kind of protect the island. You can imagine here a clubhouse, you can imagine boat storage, and things like that that are kind of quite spectacular, we think. So this, I think this image sort of sums up our plan in a lot of ways. It's a play between nature and culture. It's a play between future and past, but something that has to be uniquely Saratov and uniquely of this place. Thank you very much.
Darius, большое спасибо.
Darius, thank you very much. So if I understood correctly, that was the end of your presentation. Thank you to both teams. And we have a tremendous amount of questions. So we will try to select a few and announce. So here comes the question regarding the identity. And the question was directed to Karas and Brands, but I would like to address it to both teams. So the question is, so you were working with the identity of the city. What were the most specific traits of the city identity which you recall, which are of great importance to you? Can you specify? Question, Darius, can you please start?
Yes. For me, I remember when I first visited Saratov, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and I got a chance to have a look from the top of this tower at the Volga, at the base of the Volga, to get a beautiful perspective of the city. And then you see the enormous diversity. You know, you can see all of these spaces, but you can see that it's a city which has a lot of diversity in the city center, very dense and almost kind of sort of small-scale city center, but at the same time has beautiful nature areas, you know, ecological areas like Zeleny Island, Peski Island, the airport side. So this diversity and relationship to nature is for us, I think, one of the most important things in the identity of Saratov.
Thank you very much. Anastasia, can you please? So let Artem present. Well, those 5 areas which are a part of the city, which are interconnected with administrative borders and which are accessible through the city, those areas are very different for us. And usually those areas are divided, even on the map. And with this division in mind, we were developing separate stories for each of the areas, so that the story enhances the potential of the area and enhances the linkage of this area to the context within which this area exists. So every area, every focus point is now aimed at the very specific target audience, which would be the primary beneficiary audience. For example, if we talk about the airport, as of now it is devoid. There was an airport and now there is none. But yet there is a beautiful building of the old air station. There are elements which we would like to bring into the context of our project. Secondly, when we were thinking about the design code and the architectural elements within the airport, we understood that this void represents the unfinished, unresolved ideas about the future which were important for Saratov, but which were claimed null, because Saratov history is connected to the space, is connected to the future, is connected to the air traveling. Because when we talk about the airports, when we talk about the air carriage, it is void, it is traveling through air. And therefore, the design code for the airport was the retro-futuristic touch. We were designing things which are yet to be done, but as seen 40 years ago. And therefore, all the solutions which created are retro-futuristic. If we talk about the Glebuchef Ravine, it is located in the historical core of the city. And that means that we were reinterpreting the historical center, which definitely affects this focal point. And if we talk about the country houses, the suburban houses, which are also there, these buildings affect the Glebuchef Ravine. And so when you take into account all those landscapes, all those waterscapes are now being created, you may note very specific conceptual framings, very conceptual linkages to the palettes of the local painters. So our color coding, our color scheme is loosely connected to the palettes of the old Russian style, which is reinterpreted in the, so to speak, newer fashion. If we talk about the Pakrovskie Peski Island, this is a new territory that has been created anew, but yet is incredibly popular. Many young people spend their time there. And Natalia specified that this territory has no identity as of now. And we realized that this is a great space for youth and for young families. And therefore, the architecture which we designed is modernist by nature. So, for example, if you look at into the slope, this slope was designed for bicyclists and for people using wheelchairs. So what's the logic of the design? So if you look closely into the visualization, this very slope is the Museum of Volga River. As a person descends, one can read the informational posters one by one. And at this pace, slowly going down, one may enter the Museum of the River. And therefore, the shapes we designed are slick, are modern, are youthful, and I'm sorry if the vocabulary which I used sounds too much, but we were thinking about young people, and we were thinking about creating the art cluster, about creating parties, about the drug-free raves. Artem, I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Because we have to look into other questions. Yes, thank you. But I would just talk about Zeleny Island. We were using the aesthetics of the outside resorts. And if we look into the Zeleny Island, we're looking into the beauty of the nature. So we devised local histories. We worked with local histories. We talked about Park Pobedy, and Park Pobedy has a unique identity to it. All those territories represent and mirror the context within which they exist. Well, yes, there are many specificities to the territory. And Artem, thank you for this broad answer. But dear colleagues, please be brief. We have many questions, and it would be great to touch upon many topics. Now, question to Karis and Brent. Which elements of natural ecosystem are to be noted, are to be taken care of specifically and require much care? And how do you reflect on it in your project? Can you please answer? Darius, this is,
Yes. I think if I will try to give like a first answer, and if one of my teammates wants to add to that, please go ahead. I think for us, it was always important that nature and culture are being combined together, so that we don't just erase nature wherever it was, but that we strengthen it. That's why on Zeleny Island, we decided to not design nature, but leave space to nature, position everything, or as much as possible, everything on the water. That's why Pobedy Park, we also worked with kind of preserving and strengthening the hillside with our interventions, not just activating it, right? To preserve it so that the fragile species of birds and things like that can thrive in the area. That's why in Peski Island, we decided our interventions would not only activate the island, but also prevent from erosion. So there are these sticks that stick out into the water and kind of stimulate sedimentation from the river. It's it's almost kind of engineering with architecture, which we find very exciting. And that's why also the Glebuchev Ovrag, it's on the one hand, this beautiful kind of green play area, but it's also a water sponge in the city where water can get collected, cleaned, and infiltrated. So all the interventions are kind of nature and culture together and playing with that. That's, in a nutshell, the intervention. Is it something I'm missing, Leonid?
I do agree with your response. So from the very start, we have this idea of working between three pillars which are interconnected: architecture, infrastructure, ecology. So the solutions we provided refer to those three pillars. So when we talk about Pokrovskie Peski, we understood that we are not able to create many new buildings there because it would affect the island from the aesthetic point of view and from ecological point of view. So therefore, we created new typologies of buildings which enable both the usage from the side of the citizens and enables the preservation for the ecological site. And therefore, we have public gardens which are accessible to the citizens. And there are flowers planted there and such. But these public gardens are also strengthening the fragile slope. And therefore, in Zeleny Island, we created the typology of the buildings, on roofs of which maybe wild nature intervention, birds can create their nests, or people may have their picnics. So we have this connection between people, ecology, infrastructure. We can go on, but I guess briefly we have addressed this question. Leonid, thank you very much. People, ecology, nature, infrastructure. These are focal points. Thank you so much. So on to next questions. Question to Mega Budka. Why do you have such shapes in the construction of the bridge? The oval type. So let me answer this question because I have answered it already. So we are rethinking the old Russian architecture, and the colors and the shapes and the curves refer to this specific olden Russian style. So that is the conceptual framing. So if we look into other visualizations, the ravine is prolongated, and there are different widths and heights to it, and therefore we have sectored the ravine, and we used our specific design solutions which work for the identity of this old Russia style. Thank you very much. Next question to both of our teams. So Pakrovskie Peski Island, how do you solve the issue of accessibility? Because many people cannot reach it because there is no parking lot and you cannot park on the bridge. So Kerosene brands and then Citymakers.
I think it's best if Leonid answers this question.
So, from our point of view, the problem of accessibility cannot be solved with the increase of parking lots. And let's say that we use best practices and we think that architect shouldn't think about the parking lots, because the more parking lots you add, the lesser problems you solve. We can have a lot of parking lots on Volga, but more people would still be coming. So if we talk about Bangkok, for example, there are plenty of transportation issues there. There are many highways. The more highways you have, the more traffic jams you have. So our goal was to devise a better transport infrastructure, a better bicycle infrastructure, make it more accessible for people on bicycles, for pedestrians. So, because it is evident enough that if you cater only to the needs of car owners, you're neglecting the issue. Thank you, Anastasia. Yes, well, the thing is that bridge is getting old. We have this information that it may be exploited only for 15 years more. And we know that city plans to build a new bridge. And here I would agree with Leonid that the more parking lots and the more roads you have, the lesser you solve the transportation problem. So we thought that bridge all of a sudden becomes more of a pedestrian bridge and more of a bicycle bridge, because you have to decrease the pressure. And so we create the bicycle route, and then this bicycle road may be redesigned as the public space. I do think that Maria may also add something regarding the transportation system. Yes. So one of the possible solutions which we had we thought of making this bridge a bridge for public transportation and have more stations, public transportation stations on this bridge. So from our point of view, Peski should be should be connected via public transportation system, not cars. And this would give more of this postcard vibe of the place. And please do not forget that we're now talking about we're talking only about cars, whereas we should talk about the water transportation. Yes, and here I would agree with Artyom that our concept from the very first step, we worked on 5 territories and we had 6. We had this water park, and we looked into the connection to Engels, and we looked into the development of the water transportation system. And this is one of the crucial points of our projects as well. And this is also a part of our project. So this helps. Thank you. Thank you to all. So since we talk about the transportation, we have 2 questions regarding the airport. One is to Citymakers. So what are the historical buildings which you plan to preserve? What parts of the airport are you going to preserve? Great. So let me be more specific. So there are not that many historical buildings, but there is a historical hangar. Then there is the airport station, and we transform it into the public space, public building. But what's interesting is that we save not only the runway as the main transportational arteria, we're also preserving the side structures. For example, as far as I remember, there were parking lots for aircrafts, and we're going to preserve it, and we're going to include those territories within this park so that there wouldn't be a barrier between the livable housing and the park infrastructure. So the infrastructure which is there is the monument to the function of the place, and therefore we use it to the max, and we include it within the project to the max. So almost all the infrastructural objects there are being included. Thank you. Second question regarding airport goes to Carson Brents. So you wrote that there are kindergartens on the first floors within the airport, but Russian legislation is against kindergartens on the first floors. So what would be your take on that? How do you plan to solve this issue?
Yeah, we've discussed a lot about this. I think the best one to answer this question would be Patrick from Landaworks.
Yes, thank you, Darius. Well, it's actually a mix of different typologies that we're trying to get into the area. We have also different neighborhoods that are connected to the different neighborhoods around the airport area. So we have the central system, which is quite dense. It's a dense central model that we call it, and then we have the yards neighborhoods, we have the campus neighborhoods, we have the garden neighborhoods. So they all have their own different typologies of block structures, of more low dense housing typologies, and in those different neighborhoods we also create different types of daycare centers So these different ones are sometimes actually on the ground level. There's maybe a mix of 50% on ground level. The other ones are, for example, on the plinth, where we have the yards neighborhood, which is kind of a typology of a block structure, which is rising to the first level, and that becomes kind of a new a new carpet for the people to live on. So it's kind of the neighborhood carpet. And on that carpet, on that lifted level, there we could have, for example, these daycare centers, these kindergartens. But it's also something that has to be investigated, of course, in the next phase, where you need to look specifically on how do we want to keep the density, how do we want to approach the street, and especially where do we want to place these daycare centers. So what we did now was to place them always connected to big green systems. That also means that it's maybe sometimes a dense system. It might be raised to the higher level, but they are always connected to these bigger park structures. And of course, then we have to follow regulations and see how that fits within this specific typology. And that we of course, are very willing to do.
If I may add to this, what we learned from our experience in doing a lot of these master plans is that what is nice to have is a kind of, most of the kindergartens are separate. They're not integrated in the block or in the buildings. But it's nice to have this mix of doing things like the rules or experimenting with new ideas, especially with a big plan like this, to discuss new things and to combine the kind of European experience with the Russian know-how and develop a plan for the future. And we're doing that even in Germany, where rules never change, And that's a unique chance of a plan like this. You can test new things as well. If not everything is an experiment, but maybe just a little bit of the plan.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to other questions. So I'll ask only a couple of questions more. So dear listeners, it is now the time to vote for one of the finalists. And if there is a question which prevents you from doing so, please write it in our chat room. So first question regarding landslides. There are landslides in all the areas, especially if we talk about the ravine or if we talk about the embankment of Volga River. So let us start with Carson Brands and then move on to Citymakers. So what to do with the landslide?
Yes, Leonid, do you want to take this?
Yes, we have briefly touched upon this question. So if we talk about it from the architectural point of view, as our colleagues already said, Strelka has created a very detailed and devised brief. So the question of landslide was overviewed quite meticulously, and there were even engineering solutions suggested to us. So I wouldn't specify the exact technical solutions which we had. So we decided to have these infrastructural elements, just as I said already. So we interpret those infrastructural elements not just as the shapes of concrete or shapes of metal, which will help us to prevent the landslides. And landslide is not the only problem, because every area has its own problem. So we decided to put it into the architectural context. So each and every element becomes an interesting architectural symbol within the project. So, for example, we always have the roots, and we have retaining walls, which are used in the mountainscapes and works for the architectural identity of the place. And if we talk about the slope or the downhill, we use the gardens. And if we talk about Pokrovskie Peski, there are similar projects there with stitches. So coming back to the name of our project, which is Weaving Saratov. So we talked oftenly about the stitches which connect the city from the urban planning perspective and which connect the land, which physically connects the land, preventing the erosion, preventing the landslides, etc., etc. So yeah.
Otherwise, I think I'm done.
Прекрасно, Citymakers.
Okay, thank you. So Citymakers.
Если коротко, да,
Right. So if we are to talk briefly, so we use plants. So we as architects, it was a big surprise for us that many of the landslides and many of the erosive processes can be fixed naturally with the creation of the new ecosystem, creating an ecosystem. Mikhail can update us on the mechanisms which were used for this project.
Этот ответ и дает также ответ на вопрос, который
So this very answer,
по поводу биоразнообразия я прочитал.
so this very answer also works with the question regarding biodiversity.
Виды растений,
So through using
это древесные,
varying types of plants,
разные высоты, ну и кустарниковые, которые позволяют
and we used woody plants, and we used
и увеличивают
shrub plants, which work for the sake of the hills and which enable the tropical diversity of those locations.
необходимости
So, for example, there are locations where
травы,
there's no need to remove trees or shrubs.
а там
We
формируются новые,
let them be.
те же самые аллеи, например, на территории
But there are places where we create new alleys and new routes.
деревья.
There we are to plant new shrubs and
Конкретные
plants.
примеры, если требуется озвучить, то есть те виды, как
In case you need exact examples,
ракитник, миндаль,
so we
которые
have spirea, we have knapweeds,
как бы позволяют заселяться внутри себя птицам или
because these types of woods and shrubs have a rich tree crown which can host many birds and which can be inviting to birds. Maybe the solution which invites more insects and birds to spend time there. And this helps to
на разных
for-
глубинах
fortify the downhills
формируют достаточно высокую крону,
and
закрепляют
and trees with high tree crowns
а те,
are of help for creating this biodiversity. And there are also downhills and slopes
к
which are
образованию каких-то
not
овражных структур можно закрепить, в общем-то,
ready to transform itself into ravine, can be fortified with
даже,
shrubs
может быть, травянистыми.
or even grassy plants,
Плотный ковер.
which can create a carpet of sorts. So Mikhail, let me add, so why we decided to use those solutions. So besides from being a public good, engineering-wise, these solutions are cost-effective. So all the solutions which we can use with nature as the co-designer, we would do so. All the other solutions may be engineered differently because engineering is quite developed. I mean, we explore space, we as a species, so we can do the engineering. But through the solution which we force, we are working for the sake of the biodiversity. And Mikhail says, and yes, here I would add that when we have the architectural structure which creates this framework, which fortifies the soil, it doesn't look that natural. Whereas natural solutions look, well, natural.
Михаил, спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. So the final question regarding the usage of islands in winter. So what is there in concepts of yours? And I also saw there was a question regarding the water transportation in the winter. So everyone is pretty much okay with using it in summer season, but it's like 3 months. So let us start with Carson Brands and then Citymakers.
Darius, I will answer, okay? And then you can add. В нашем проекте, разумеется,
So regarding our project, we considered winter, and winter was an important thing to discuss. We do understand that what Russian winter is, and our colleagues, despite the fact that they're foreigners, do understand what winter is, because, well, for example, Sweden is quite all right about winter, and therefore we have many activities. So if we talk about Pokrovskie Peski, one can go tobogganing, one can have a ski route, one can have pedestrian routes. There was another idea to create in some of the pavilions warm thermic baths, which may be used as the bathing facility. So as we were joking, the desert village transforms into the igloo village. So if we talk about Glebuchef Ravine, tobogganing is also an option, and the bridges may be used as the public spaces with temporary kiosks for events of sorts, and you can buy their glint wine or hot tea and go skiing and tobogganing. And in Park Pobedy, we didn't plan for sport activities, but the territory itself may be used for winter activities. If my colleagues have anything to add, please do so. Otherwise, well, let the floor go to Citymakers.
Maybe I can just add that we also, by just creating these different park spaces and square spaces in the airport city, we also discovered different ways of being into this winter landscape. So it's the winter park landscape, it's the square landscape, and all these discoveries of these different parts of the airport have been discoveries of the existing system. For example, the end sides of the airstrips are something that we discovered as something very special. It's local, it's there right now. And they make all of a sudden a whole new space, which is actually in the brief, it already said that a lot of different elements have to be kept, and we kept them, of course. But we made a lot of new discoveries that lifted kind of these public spaces that then all of a sudden are a setting for different winter landscapes and winter activities in the big park, in the smaller square, in the pocket square, in the Ramblas that we also have in the airport city. So they are all part, I would say, of these discoveries that we did of Saratov, and that are part of this weaving system, also the weaving in the winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. Artyom wants to answer. So, when we were creating the concept visualization, we had winter activities. If we talk about the airport, it is quite understandable. The functionality of the airport area is not that diverse. So you can just have it in our visualization. Regarding other territories, so if we talk about Park Pobedy, we should note that from the eastern downhill, we have it can be used for tobogganing. It is a slope. So this slope is going to be a tobogganing slope. Also, there is this function for official ceremonies and for all the activities which require specific equipment. Those activities may be installed within Park Pobedy. So regarding the islands, so islands are nature reserves, and the anthropogenic pressure there is quite low, and it is there in the summer because there is a lack of natural resorts, and many people go there in the summer, and we cannot limit it in summer. But in winter time and in the cross-seasonal time, we insist on insist that the ecosystem of the islands should regenerate. It got to regenerate, otherwise it wouldn't survive the next season. Yet, partly functions remain. If we talk about Pokrovskie Peski, we talked about using the territory of the isle as the set of punctures with art objects, which can be connected via pedestrian routes. And these routes may be also ski routes. And so the route is devised in such a way that from every angle and from every point of view within this route, you have the most beautiful sightseeing, and you see the features of the island, which were underrepresented. Same stands for the Zeleny Island, because 80% of the island is just greenery. And if we talk about the central part of the island, about its core, what the function is, and let me remind you that our main function is the health resort. So therefore, steam bath, sauna, open outdoor spa complex. This would also be the entry point, and this will be a point of interest for the tourists. And this will help the isle to maintain a sustainable economy. Artyom, thank you very much. Sofia, can you briefly? Regarding the water transportation in winter, let us note that we largely depend on nature and the global warming. And we know that Volga is usually covered with ice, and we use the historical photos with people who took pictures near Debarkada on skis, and our Swedish colleagues offered creating something as the amphibic cars, which can shift from swimming to sledging. So this project is to be developed, and to be developed is the future, and the future is unstable. So therefore, we are to look into it. So yes, let us keep updated with the news on the planetary scale. So we have the final question. A very exact one regarding the sewage system and the sewage buildings, sewage constructed elements. I do ask the representatives of both teams. So will the sewer gullies, sewer within the ravine be cleaned, and will there be filtering facilities? Let us start with Citymakers and then Leonid from Kersen Brands. Igor wants to reply. So regarding the sewage, so we had those facilities in the brief, because this is the necessity, this is something that city needs, because the city engineers decided so. And we're not doubting this necessity, but we suggest to use the sewage facility as the educational facility as well. We wanted to make open and accessible to families, so that children may learn on how the water is getting filtered and cleaned, how the hydrophysics works, because we want this functional object to be a scientific museum of sorts. And we want to use plants as well, yes. Because plants are working as a sponge, as the filtering system as well.
были как раз подобраны виды,
And
соответственно,
so therefore we have selected the appropriate
постоянно
plants.
стоит вода, были подобраны виды, там ежовник, ирис, кубышка.
We're going to use hedgerows, we are going to use water lilies,
хвощ и виды,
we are
которые
going to use horsetails, and we're going to use dandelions as well. So this diversity of species which we are to use will update the filtering system, and we're going to have the functional diversity, which is complemented by the biological diversity.
Спасибо, Леонид.
Mikhail, thank you. Leonid, the floor is yours. Well, interestingly enough, we are close here on this issue with Citymakers because we have this conception of infrastructure becoming a part of the cultural heritage and of cultural activity. So we're not dissecting museum and the public facility. So if you talk about the ravine, the idea was to use the bridges. Not in the classical fashion in which classical for Russian sites. So every time we have a filtering facility or a sewage facility, which looks as the concrete block, crude concrete with wire around. So we wanted to open it up, to make it an educational center. And so we decided to use Glebuchef Ravine as the educational ecological park. So here we follow the rhythm of the same drum. And I feel that this is a beautiful rhythm, beautiful final note for our presentation. So I sincerely thank every our participant. I thank every listener and every participant, and the winner will be decided in accordance to the voting, and this voting takes time to 11th of March. So we do hope we addressed some of your questions, and we spoke broadly enough to be an inspiration for you to cast. So I thank you very much. If you have any other questions, I do think that you may use the chat room or address our email. Have a great evening. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.